Hi, folks.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Let me start sharing my screen.
Do you feel better, Sudan?
Hi, Bayman. I think I'm slowly recovering, but I feel like it just takes time. I'm on my day 5, I think. From previous experience, it was I do need the full 7 days to like to get rid of the cough.
Uh, I hope you can get well much very soon.
Thank you, Bayman. Take care. I heard there's some flu going on in Shanghai or Beijing. I've seen some stuff on social media. So take care,
Correct.
everyone. Um, yeah, I can see people adding to the agenda. I'll be mostly listening in today, just to save some voice. But we'll quickly go through the PRs and then we can move on to the agendas. So the first one is 1246. Akash, we will talk about this one after we go through the PR list.
Yes, yeah, that sounds good.
That's good. Just a quick status check on the error messages from the plugin.
I think Josh posted in the Slack channel that he's making some good progress on it. He told me offline that he'll probably be ready for another review next week. I think that's what he's targeting. So
Okay, so he's still working on the changes, is that correct?
yes.
Yeah, sounds good. So that one's still in progress. Can you make this window slightly smaller? Oh. 1264.
Oh, yeah, I was under the weather 2 days before, so this one is also still under progress.
Oh, cool. Jingchen, so yeah, just tag us when you need a round of review. So Bin
Sure.
have given some comments, it seems.
Yeah, I will resolve these comments. Thank you.
Next one, 1265. This one is adding the status property to the verifier and store CR. So I imagine, Bin, this one would have some conflict with your PR. So I think it might be good if we go through this. We can go through it separately this week, I guess today or next week in the PR meeting if you have any questions. But I guess I want to go through this PR just to make sure that we don't miss any change when we merge the sub-status property into the new set of CRDs. And there's a couple of changes in the test. Yeah, but we can go through this one later in more detail, but this one is in the ready to review status. Just seeing if there's any pending comments. Yes, hi Akash, I see your question about the auras versus sample. So the trying to think. So we added validation logic for the plugin path, and the built-in ones are not added to the map because in the test we did not initialize the factories for the verifiers. Does that make sense? So it's easier because it's a test to test if we're adding a verifier correctly to the map. It's easier to use a external sample plugin than the built-in auras verifier.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm fine either way. I was just curious why. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, that was so previously we don't do any path check, but this change would now do a plugin name check on initialization.
Okay.
Next one, 1267. Bin, that one is still work in progress.
Yes, actually I just found a bug on the namespace of the search store, so trying to fix that.
Oh, thank you. 1276.
Yep. This one's just waiting for review whenever you have a chance.
Yeah, I was curious, Akash, what's the motivation? Like, is there any bug or any library that you need to use that triggered the upgrade?
It's primarily because 1.22 is in beta right now and it will be released soon. So just to keep up with Go versioning, a lot of the dependencies that we rely on have already upgraded. And we did run into one, not issue, but one internal pipeline that was having trouble with a 1.20 versus 1.21. So also
I
why,
see.
yeah.
And there's no breaking changes or anything, so it's a pretty safe change to take, right?
Yeah, there's no breaking changes.
Okay, thanks. We'll get this reviewed quickly. Should be good to go. Then last one, 1280. This one is reported by one of our partners. And I think I left a question here just on the null check. So Akash and then we can review the logic maybe offline later, just to see if we need some additional null check. Cool. Going to our web repository. It's one open PR, update Ratify on Azure. Trying to, instead of local chat, a key name to surname.
Looks like a new user. I haven't seen this person before.
Yeah, so I guess the documentation, the Ratify on Azure, is it a pretty new doc or a pretty, or it doesn't really matter. I think the change seems reasonable, right? just minor changes. We'll get this reviewed soon. Yeah, it looks pretty simple change. Cool. That's everything on the PR. Back to agenda. The cosine design doc walkthrough. Akash, would you like me to make you the host?
Yes, yeah. I know that you're here for only the first half, so I'll give a more high level and discussion about it, specifically pointing out things that we should kind of make a decision on quickly. And then maybe we can go into specifics later. So let me just share my screen. Give me a second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So quick overview. I think we're all familiar with this, but the current behavior of the cosine verifier is limited in terms of both its key support as well as the type of keys that it supports, as well as the fact that you can't actually configure any sort of external key provider like a KMS system like Azure Key Vault or other provider specific ones. So based off of those missing requirements, this design document touches on 3 of the main issues that we're supposed to fix in the next milestone. So the first is allow for cosine verification with multiple keys. Second one is allowing for the cosine verification with different KMS. So we'll start off with support with Azure Key Vault, and then finally support cosine verification with different types of keys. So right now we only support EC DSA keys, but the actual cosine CLI verifier supports other types of keys, including RSA and ED 25519. So for parity, we will support RSA and the other one. So I'll go through each section, which will correspond to each of these issues. But I'll focus mainly on the things that we need to discuss, as well as the user experience that we're going to be defining. So the first one we're going to talk about is support will support keys that are managed in some sort of KMS. So you could think of it in terms of a first-class Kubernetes resource for keys, similar to how certificate stores are currently implemented. So there's kind of 3 ways that we could build this out. The first option we have is to just extend the existing certificate store. And that would be kind of a natural option in that a lot of the underlying functionality of the certificate store is mirrored for keys as well. So high level, what it would look like is we would have our existing inline certificate store provider, and we would add an extra type field, which would specify what type you're actually specifying. So are we doing a certificate here, or are we doing a key? And then you kind of, same as the certificate inline store, you just provide your RSA key block here. For the Key Vault certificate provider, we would have a very similar configuration experience as before, except before we would only allow for a certificates array, and then each array value was a certificate name and certificate version key pair. For this one, we'll have a separate keys list, and you can specify the key name and the key version. And you could also mix and match. So you could, in the same AKV cert provider, you could provide a list of keys that you want to configure as well as certificates that you want to configure. I'm going to skip the implementation details for now, but let's quickly move to option 2. So the option 2 is we rename our existing certificate store to something more generic, like you mentioned key management system as being maybe a more suitable name. So this would basically entail us replacing the certificate store with a new resource, which is called key management system. And it would be essentially the same exact implementation of certificate store plus the key, the extra key support that we're going to add, except we would just be calling it a different name. So instead of certificate store, it would just be called key management system, and all the functionality would stay the exact same. So option 2 is nicer. I guess we could kind of discuss this, but the name might be a little bit more friendly. However, there's a lot of extra overhead that we're going to have to do in order to support this. One is we'll need to come up with a deprecation strategy for certificate store. And due to this being kind of a breaking change, we can't just not support certificate store while we're on V1. We'll need to keep certificate store along with this new resource that we introduce. And then we'll need to have like a plan to slowly remove documentation, change implementation, and then eventually remove the implementation post v 2.0. But until then, there's kind of be this flux of where both will be supported, and we'll need to explain to folks who are already familiar with certificate store that, hey, you need to now move over to this new resource and the corresponding resource definition for key management system, which could also be challenging for that. So that's option 2. Option 3, we kind of already discussed last week, which was what if we introduced a new resource, but that's specifically only for key management and not certificate management. So you'd have 2 side-by-side resources, certificate store and key store. I think we landed on unifying the 2 experiences under a single provider. So I think option 3 is not really one that we want to support, but I've just left it in the design doc anyway. So for this one, I'll stop right now, and maybe we can discuss kind of what everyone's thinking in terms of option 1 and 2 and which one you prefer. So option 1, again, is just existing certificate store. We just add the key implementation to it, and we don't do any sort of new custom resource that gets added to it. And then option 2 is we just do this kind of rename where we introduce a new one that will replace the certificate store. So yeah, anyone have any preferences, thoughts, opinions?
I want to know if making the model pluggable is in scope, because if we introduced breaking changes and then later if we introduced a new plugin model, maybe there's like more changes that the user need to apply again.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what I was thinking is that we could actually, for both options, we could add plugin support, and it could be kind of, it wouldn't be a breaking change. It would be kind of in addition to it, because we'd be adding fields to the existing certificate store CRD for specifying the address or your plugin path, and also adding that source capability, the OCI artifact download capability that we already provide for Verifier and the Aura store. So if for option 1, it would just be adding it to the existing one as new fields. And option 2, we would not add plugin capability to the existing certificate store because it's already being deprecated. And instead, now if you want this new capability, move over to the key management system. So that's how I was thinking about it. Sajay, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was, are these stores, can we keep these stores mutually exclusive, where if the key store or certificate store is enabled, then you cannot enable the key management system? And technically, because you're adding a new resource, it's okay to have a validation that when you enable this thing, the other one cannot be there and things like that. It's not breaking because it's just an additive feature and people don't opt into it. The other thing is we could potentially release 1.0 of key management store, which is a combined one. And in Ratify 2.0 break saying that, yeah, we don't support the old deprecated store anymore, and everybody has to move to it, but they have time to kind of run them side by side and even add one and remove the other as needed, right?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I think we can add an enforcement mechanism. So only one is
yeah, otherwise you have to handle all these weird edge cases of which is available, which is not. And yeah, we can send a clear message that yes, everything is happening in the new store and that's okay. And maybe we create a milestone for Ratify 2.0, and this will be a breaking change in it with one work item to remove the old key store also, or the old certificate store.
I think it's possible, but it sounds like the name is enough of a misleading thing where if we just stuck with certificate store and didn't switch to key management system, that it is warranting like a new resource being added, because I guess implementation wise and feature set wise, they would be the exact same thing. Option 1 and 2 is just a matter of the name kind of changing.
I think that's okay, right? Like if we say it is a KMS and we are introducing a KMS store, and it's not and certificate store is going away. I if you keep the message consistent that KMS is superseding cert store, and we use that everywhere, it might be okay. Unless you want to call it version. I've always been concerned with versions where messaging always gets a little confusing. So if we say that cert store is deprecated and KMS is the way we go forward, maybe use that everywhere. And they're mutually exclusive. But one supersedes the other, right?
Yep. Okay. Makes sense.
And yeah, we can patch fix the other. I think it's the cost of always adding something without breaking. Once you decide to release, then it's always going to be there, because now we want consumers to kind of like take it also and enable one CRD. So that'll take time.
Okay, so I think right now we're leaning to option
That's just my opinion. I haven't heard from anybody else, so I'm not
yeah. Yi, anyone else? Yi, Feynman, do you have a opinion on this? I know Feynman, you left a comment about this, so if you wanted to discuss or summarize what you had left on the PR.
Okay, I just have a small question. So I'm thinking whether the key management system, the new name of the CID is narrow. I want to double confirm whether those non-KMS service like AWS Signer or other managed key service like Azure Code Signing, right? If will those key management service connect with the new CRD, new key management system CRD, or this is only designed for the key and certificate usage?
Yeah, right now I think we've just been thinking of it in terms of what would be the equivalent KMS service. So I don't know if the AWS one is also called Signer or Vault or something equivalent to that. Like the HashiCorp equivalent would be HashiCorp Vault. GCP has their own KMS as well, but I guess the managed signing service is that a separate? I think that's a separate service than the KMS, right? Or maybe I'm not understanding it.
Um,
Yeah,
actually,
in general, when we say
yeah,
KMS, we mean those KMS service.
yeah. I think we can take it
It's
like this.
network is not stable.
Sorry, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I'm about to say the same thing as Sajid just comment. I think the option 2, right? It's we can decide the name later, but I think the option 2, the main goal is that we will have a kind of one how to say, one resource for configure the verification related how to say that it could be a key manager system. It could be also assign authority that user don't need to manage a key and certificate. We just need to figure out whether there is a better name. But the goal is that we will have that one resource. We have a different provider, right? For each provider, they are different requirement. For example, if it is arrow keyboard, we have the necessary property that user need to provide, and if it's AWS signer, it could be other properties. These are just the different providers, and also if it is inline, it's different. So option 2 is a kind of one resource that can aggregate all these different providers. So maybe we can consider a better name for that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. If you could help out with the name, I'm not sure what is the most generic encompassing name that we can use here. We'll go with whatever you come up with, Yi. But I saw that you had put key management system, so that's what I went with. But yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have the greatest track record for naming in general, so yeah.
Yeah, we are think about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I
Yeah,
think we're
but as I said, the main goal for this is we unified all the interface as a different provider, right? We have this one interface, then we have a different providers. Yeah.
sounds good. Cool. Any other questions, comments on this section here?
I was originally voting for option 1, but now I think if we propose Ratify v2, I think option 2 is also acceptable, because it's acceptable to introduce a breaking change in v2.
I want to also comment on this. I think the current strategy is that in Ratify 2.0, we will have basically collect all the breaking changes for V2. But currently, we are adding a new resource, right? We are still on the Ratify 1 track. On this track, so we are adding a new resource. This resource can be used for different providers, and as Sajid said, if user choose the certificate store, it will not. Maybe we can call it a K-managed system for now. So for this resource will not work. They are exclusive. So for Ratify 1, this track we will have a 2 resource, and on Ratify 2.0, we will have other breaking changes, and we do them together. So for example, for 1.2, we just add a new resource and make it clear what's the relationship between the original certificate store, and we will use the new resource.
Yeah. So we can start to shift our documentation and recommendations towards the new resource, but we'll still support the old one, but it'll be mutually exclusive.
Just one question, and as we discussed the deprecation timeline and all that, it is like when different cloud providers adopt different versions of Ratify, it is a responsibility to sort of upgrade whenever they feel they're ready, right? Like we don't have any commitments with different cloud providers on as far as when to deprecate and things like that, right?
I think we put the milestone in the plan, and we can communicate that and keep the issue open long enough to figure out and get feedback as there is a problem or not. the most of these conversations is about how long you communicate publicly what the message is, and there's no surprises in the community. It should be fine.
Okay.
We're not doing anything breaking right now.
Right. No. So we will I think the sort of making sure that customers are picking one or the other, so they're making them mutually exclusive, makes sense for an eventual sort of ask to switch. But just just wanna make sure that when we communicate that, like we don't have like like Amazon or Microsoft or any of these big cloud providers like ask, hey, why this timeline for introducing these breaking changes and things like that. So
Sure.
I think we should just be very communicative when we intend to do a V2 that's gonna break. Correct.
Can we tag Singha on this and then get some feedback also if there's any concern?
Right.
I'll tag him and I'll mention it to Charles as well.
Cool.
On the same note, this is not directly related to this work, but in V2.0, we'll probably need to change our API to drop Dace Labs eventually. Maybe we can also bundle that work with that.
I think Feynman might have some news. Oh, did Feynman drop? No.
Yeah.
I did say that we'll get it sorted this week, right? Let's see. Feynman, are we kind of like in a position to discuss like the timeline? You had some ideas,
You mean
right? Donation for Ratify.
I have an agenda. I have a topic listed on the agenda.
All right.
We can discuss it later.
Okay, sounds good. Cool. All right, so that's kind of wraps up the first part of the spec. The next part, this is the one that we're going to need more discussion, and I'll have to walk everyone through the specific scenarios. There's a lot of nuanced areas here, but this is the part where we're going to support multiple keys for cosign verification. Unfortunately, what makes this more complicated is that cosign itself does not support multi-key verification. So that when you do cosign verify on the CLI, you're specifying a single key. So there's we'll have to kind of define how the behavior is where if you have multiple keys, what does that result in a certain like signature, overall signature passing or failing depending on which keys are used. And we will need to figure out how do we kind of adjust those knobs or enable our customers to be able to set those settings somehow in the cosign verifier so that they can get whatever desired behavior they want for that. So just to start, some of the goals here are we want to make sure that the cosign verifier can trust multiple set of keys, and then you can perform verification using the trusted key set. And then based off of how loose or strict you want the verification to be, you can determine like either if there are multiple signatures attached to a single image, if there are multiple keys that are configured in your cosign verifier, how does the key to signature verification map, and what is the threshold where we can determine the overall cosign verification result passes. The second part is that the cosign verifier in general must at a minimum match the verification logic of the cosign CLI, because we want to avoid scenarios where customer says, oh, I do cosign verify on the image and I get one result, and then for ratify verify, they're getting a different result. So we definitely don't want that. And then the third one is we should be able to kind of operate in both a loose and a strict setting. So loose would be all keys are equally trusted and only one is required to be used in the validation, or strict where we can say, okay, all keys are trusted, all keys must be used, and so you must encounter a signature or multiple signatures that map to multiple keys that you trust. And there's different scenarios I've laid out here that would be used for each of these different scenarios. So how does the cosign CLI currently work today? Well, it's using their own tag schema. So when you pass in a subject to push a signature to, it generates a new OCI image manifest. And in the manifest, it's tagged using this special tag, the digest.sig tag, and it stays at the same level repository as your image. And if we look at the actual manifest, every single signature, so if you sign an image multiple times with multiple keys, they all get pushed to the same OCI image manifest. So you have, this is one signature, second signature, third signature here. And these don't all correspond to the same key. These could be signed with different keys. So in the cosign CLI, if you pass in a key that you want to verify with, if there's one signature of the ones it finds that succeeds, it considers that an overall success. So it only requires one signature to verify to true. But there are scenarios where we might want to enforce that all signatures that you encounter must be true. But cosign currently doesn't actually define in their own CLI what that behavior looks like. So there's no way to configure that in cosign. So we can discuss that later on if we want to even support those scenarios and how that would look like. So just to summarize here, so the signature succeeds if at least one of the signature verifies to true with the same corresponding key that you provided. And the validation occurs in parallel. So for each of these signatures that it encounters, it applies the same key to verify each of those signatures. And then depending on the output of all of these verifications, it succeeds if at least one succeeds, and it fails if all of them fail. So from a user scenario point of view, here are some that I thought of, but again, I might be missing some. So please just kind of interrupt me, or if there's any questions, if something doesn't make sense, just interrupt me. So the first one was I've got my image and I signed it, and I've got a single signature on it. So a single signature would mean that I've only got one layer in this OCI image manifest. And in my organization, I actually trust two different keys. So this is kind of your trusted key set is larger than the actual number of signatures that you're going to encounter. And the organization may utilize and trust both keys, and they may use both keys interchangeably for signing, but they're only using one of the keys to actually produce one signature on a single image, right? So what that would look like is that you install Ratify, and then you kind of configure these two new inline key management system custom resources. The first one, inline key 1, you're going to define, you're going to specify, okay, I'm specifying a key, and I specify my key block right here. Similarly here, I have another inline key provider, key 2, and I specify my second unique key block here. And in my cosign verifier, I will specify the key management system resources that I actually trust for the cosign verifier. So I'll say I trust inline key 1 and I trust inline key 2. And so now when a user attempts to deploy a pod that has been signed with a key from inline key 1, the pod is verified and created successfully. And the behavior here is that we cycle through all of the keys. We apply the cosign verification logic on the single signature that we found. And because one of the keys resulted in a success, we consider that to be an overall success. Same thing where if we had an image that was signed by key 2, that would also succeed. But if it's not signed with key 1 or key 2, then it fails. Yes, questions?
How did you bind which key to use for which scope?
Yeah, that's a good question. The scope is now pretty generic. It's just at the KMS level. So if you define your verifier, all cosign verifications that occur for that cluster, if it's a cluster scoped verifier, are going to trust inline key 1 and inline key 2 resource.
Do you mind if we introduce a scope similar to the trust policy that Notation has? So that by default, yes, it's easy to kind of keep the scope generic, and most likely that's what everybody will use. And maybe we can do it as an additive proposal over this. But if we were to kind of scope a key to a given, let's say, for example, we want to trust all images from MCR is signed with Microsoft, but from my registry, I want it to be signed with my DevOps key or something like that, so that you have some notion of which key to use for which scope. Otherwise, you'll end up with a compound M by N problem, right? Maybe we don't have to solve it now, But I think at least making an issue once you do the implementation to support scopes might be something we can discuss on as a follow-up.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll take a note of that.
The other thing is, before we go on, I think we should always model with multiple keys. Key rotation is a constant problem, right? So let's just assume that we have key rotation as a default. So everything that we do, all the samples we write, just to key 1, key 2, so that there's no confusion of how rotation happens, right? Or at least comment it out in such a way that the Helm chart says, if you want to rotate, then you add this key as a way to kind of like indicate that we've already thought through this problem about key rotation. Yeah, those are the 2 points that I was just hoping we covered in some way.
Sure, yeah, I think for Susan, maybe you can help me here too, but I think for notation, we may need to also update. A lot of our default documentation uses 1 key or 1 certificate, or no, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we may need to update that too, to make it clear that we support multiple certificates too.
Yeah, so maybe you can create another work item to describe how multiple certs and multiple keys are used in these scenarios, or just have a doc item for talking about key rotation in general. I think anything that's mature enough knows that in a month or 2, you end up getting a new key if something is accidentally compromised. The other question I had is, maybe this is an overall thing. Do we need to consider revocation on any of these? Like, should we kind of do a deny list of keys in any of these? Or just the set is kind of how we determine what is accepted. Is there a notion of like a deny list here? I don't know whether we'll solve it, but at least make sure we call it out that we don't support it might be good enough.
Yeah, I think it's worth supporting it. As far as my research to see how Cosine does it, Cosine doesn't really do any sort of key management, so they're kind of not been a good point to look. But I was looking at like Caverno, they also don't have a concept of a revocation list. So, but I think maybe we can consider it too, because like you said, it's going to become important. So. But just to come back to this, does this behavior kind of make sense where it is a possibility where you would have a trusted key set and you would be satisfied with, okay, if at least one of the keys was used during signature verification, then I can kind of safely assume that I can say, give it the thumbs up and passes verification for cosine.
Yeah, I think the default here you're going for is any instead of all, right? So from any kind of other construct that we look at, it's either, if we call out that our pattern is any match instead of all match, that might be okay. And later on, if you wanted to do an all match semantic, we could do that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
So the thing is, if you do the scopes, then it becomes easier, because that way you don't have to worry about incorrectly signed keys and things like that. You know that this scope is only doing this key. You get a scoping semantic there. But that's okay. So for now, I think it's okay. But the point is, if we don't do scopes, I don't even know how we're using the cosine SDK, the 6-store SDK, to kind of like validate, right? We wouldn't be using the CLI.
Yeah. And they're unfortunately, the way they've laid out their SDK, it's not very modular. So we're going to have to re-implement a lot of the same logic that they have exposed as private unexported methods in cosine, which is
Okay.
Yeah, we already have to do that to a certain extent in order to get ORS to work with the cosine, because cosine's library, the way they've written is it's embedded with Crane. They really use a lot of Crane in order to fetch signatures. So
yeah, John Johnson owns Crane and he's in Chain Guard, so I guess it's kind of like coupled together at this point.
Yeah. So so I'll get to another scenario where I introduce it, but I did introduce this new thing called key, kind of like your scope. I guess not scope, but the any versus all construct that we used to have for our config policy provider.
Can we not introduce this for V1 and then, like, as you evolve, bring this in? Because the moment you do scopes, you can just do star and be done with, right?
Yeah, I think
Because it's hard to kind of like revise all to then introduce scope, because then it becomes all for a given scope or any for a given scope, it gets more complicated. So maybe we can open a follow-up item, and key enforcement is by default is all keys that exist are acceptable. There's no priority or anything like that.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. The other one to consider is that we're going to trust a key management system resource, but there are other providers like the Key Vault that you can define multiple keys in it. So that means you're trusting all of the keys that are from that specific key vault. We would need some sort of way to trust like specific key, like have a key identifier that, okay, I
Yes.
trust specific keys in that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like to scope the key that you need, right? Like you definitely you can have a test key, but you never sign anything with the test key. And sometimes they use the same keyword because the access policies. And it's easy to kind of like give off certs from there. But I think it's going to be hard if we say that all keys in this key vault actually are trusted.
Yeah, that's fair. I think for our inline provider, it
I
makes
mean,
sense.
even for a demo app, I usually use the same, like my SSH key and my signing key might be in the same key vault, right? You don't want SSH key to be either. It just makes it more like the blast radius is too much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I think I'll add that. I haven't actually added that to the document, but we need to introduce like a key identifier for the AKV one. For inline cert, it's easier because right now we only support a single value to be provided, so you can't even provide multiple keys or certificates in a single inline provider.
I see.
Yeah, it's the key vault. You can define multiple objects there.
But if it's a PEM bundle, or is that good enough for multiple keys?
Yeah, because you would put it all in the same block anyway, right? The whole bundle. Yeah.
And that way you can do multi keys. But the point is how we tested it. I think that's the second one. And then documenting how to create a bundle is going to be fun also. So, but I think the PEM bundle is a pretty common construct, right? Like it's not something that we. I mean, if you work on PKI, it's pretty straightforward. So, I would say like is multi-key. All these are different use cases, right? I don't think the idea is to boil the ocean here. Like, at least let's make issues. Let's support multi-keys. Let's have an issue for scope. Let's have an issue for the breaking change and proposal and things like that, and the any or all versions. So I think the follow-up is we can do a bunch of issues, and then you can prioritize one, and people can pick up different.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think my purpose here was like I'm gonna lay out the scenarios that I can think of, and then let's figure out which ones we want to target first in the first iteration. And
Pain and go.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the field key enforcement. So I see there's a sample value or defined in the key enforcement. So apart from or, is there any options that users can define in the key enforcement?
I was actually asking to get rid of the all, so that we only have all any as the default.
I think what Sajay is saying is that if we don't do key enforcement, then our default behavior is just any, and then when we do introduce scoping, that can kind of serve as the equivalent for you can get the simulated all behavior that way, maybe.
So this is more like a single switch for to allow users to use single verifier instead of multiple verifiers.
Yes.
With two parts. I think if you did want to do all, we can introduce the what is your flag that you proposed? So it was below, right?
Yeah, it's this one here, key enforcement.
Yeah, key enforcement. I would hold off on that, because if you want to introduce key rotation, how are you going to do this? Because you won't have the second key in the system, right? And maybe I haven't signed anything with that, but I do want to introduce it. So it becomes challenging when you have any concepts of all keys. It's just about composition of these scenarios. So maybe you want that, or maybe you don't. So I would say this is maybe worth deferring for some time, then come back to the key enforcement, how many keys you want and whatnot. And then when we get to, if we get to scopes, we can say that these are the set of keys that are required, right? Like you have a set that says this is a minimum of, you need a deployer key and you need maybe a signing key, but something like that, or an attestation key. I don't know. This is more like a PM question. Like, how do we want to look at it once we get to attestations? But Feynman, to your question, I'm thinking we defer the key enforcement flag until we have the basic verifier with any key working, and then we can consider that the default value for key enforcement is any, and maybe we'll get to all or some combination like that. Or maybe introduce scopes where one scope and one key, right? Like what notation has.
Currently, I don't have a certain answer for the default value and other options of the key enforcement.
Okay.
I still need to look into the scenarios of multiple keys. This
Yeah.
is not very common in notation, but seems very
Yeah.
common in cosine. Yeah.
Yeah, and key rotation is kind of the thing that I'm more interested in. Like anything real production workloads will have key rotation.
Yeah, yeah. Key rotation is very frequent in production usage.
Cool. Do we have time for Feynman's agenda item? I don't want to kind of like lose that.
Yeah, I'll pause here then. We can pick this up later. There's a few more scenarios we'll have to go through, but it's going to take longer than I think the time we have left anyway. So
Yeah, this is a good discussion. Awesome stuff.
thank you all for your inputs. I'll add some of the feedback and then be ready for another round review.
Okay, I will give some of my comments in your PR.
Thanks. Yeah, and please, if I'm missing a scenario, this is just stuff I thought of. The other interesting one is actually the one that we heard from one of the teams in Microsoft about enforcing all signatures need to verify to true, and they have multiple keys in their key pool that each match to a different signature because they have pipelines where it passed your test or passed your build, passed all of that. So that's like another scenario.
And that's the multi-key scenario, right?
Yeah.
And multi-key, multi-signature. Okay, let's do that separately.
Yeah. So I'll stop sharing now.
So Akash, you are still the host, right? I think you
Yes.
can also keep sharing, and I just need a few minutes to quickly share what we need to prepare for the donation and the timeline that we need to take care.
Sure. Did you want me to bring anything?
Yeah, please switch back to the agenda and click on one topic. There's a link related to the Ratify donation work. If not, I can also share that link directly in the chat. Yeah, here's the link.
Is this the document?
Yeah, it's a simple document after I did a research and confirmation with CNCF TOC and checked their criteria. So I created this checklist and compare with the current status of Ratify project. And the purpose is to figure out what we will need to, Luis, you asked the link to share the link in the chat. Let me share that link. So everyone will be able to comment in this page. So this is a document that provides a checklist and recommended actionable items before donating Ratify to CNCF based on the CNCF sandbox submission form. And the timeline we will need to notice is that the next proposal review meeting is April 9. I shared that date in our chat. So everything we will need to prepare means we will need to complete before April 9. So let's take a look at this checklist. So we only need to take care of those items in this list which are not marked as which are not checked. So the third one that we will need to take care is the organization repo URL. So in general, donating a project to CNCF will require us to create a new organization. Like ORAS and Notary project, we have individual organization for the project. So that means we will need to create a new organization for Ratify projects before we donate the project to the CNCF. The country is still in base lab, so we will need to create a new org for our 2 repos. Currently, Ratify has 2 repositories, right?
So Feynman, can we create the org and do the transfer after talking to Bridget? She, I think, base lab, all the stuff. Bridget takes care, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think this will need Bridget's assistance on creating a new repo and migrate repositories to the new repo.
Can you and Louis take care of creating the org?
Okay, I got you. So next item that we will need to keep an eye on it is the roadmap. So it would be better that we can create a document to clarify the short-term and long-term roadmap, the long-term plans for the whole roadmap. Kind of we have only the milestone, which listed all of the issues that we want to achieve in the short term, right? The next milestone is clear, but in general, for those CNCF TOC folks, they might not be very familiar with Ratify. So a concrete and detailed roadmap document would be better for others to understand the vision and goals of the Ratify project. So I'm thinking we should create a roadmap document, clarify our vision and goals, and also the values of the project.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think this can be an issue to track in the Ratify major repo.
Yeah, I think each one of these we can just create issues and track here. Maybe a project or something.
Yeah. Another thing that we need to take care is the adopters. So I think what we need to do within recent 2 months is to promote the project widely and increase the adoption. Collect the adopters' information to justify the project values and user scenarios. Finally, we will need to create a adopters document in the Ratify, whatever on the website or in the Ratify repo to list all non-adopters.
Can we follow what Copacetic did? Copacetic was a very scope project, and it was much lighter in the sense of usage, and it was kind of taken into sandbox, right? So maybe we can follow what Copacetic did.
Yeah, I can follow up. I can follow up with Xander.
Okay.
I know Copacetic has been accepted recently. I think the last thing that we need to take care, maybe Akash, you can scroll down. The things which are not very urgent, I will skip. But the last thing that we need to prepare is the presenting the project in the CNCF security tag and get an approval from the tag chairs. In general, if we submit a project to the CNCF TOC, they will request related tag to review our proposal and determine whether this is a valued project for them to accept. So in general, they will request the CNCF tag like security tag to review the project and our proposal.
Sounds
so
good.
we should be ready for the presentation. I think I finished the walkthrough, and I think we will need to create related issues to track all of those items and make sure we can complete all of those items before April 9.
Awesome. Thanks, Feynman. I had committed to Susan in our own one that by next week we'll find a plan to get the donation come through. So I'm happy that you kind of like had this in the back of your pocket. Cool.
Okay, I think we are running out of time. Back to Susan Akash.
Thanks, Feynman.
Akash, we're at time today. Should we continue the cosine discussion next week?
Yes, if
Or we can also use the PR meeting actually.
yeah, that works too. As long as we don't have any other PRs we need to review. But yeah, I'll probably need another half an hour at least to discuss the remaining scenarios.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll continue next session then. Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.